My name is Jennifer Poissy Choi, student number 120035854. I'm going to do a presentation on based on one of the topic of my module AH32920, topic 3 on silence in picture, significant sound visually. So while researching on silence in picture, significant sound visually, I came up with the question regarding the topic to investigate: does silence exist, and can it be visualized? In order to explore this sufficiently, the term silence need to be studied. In terms of its literal dictionary definition, the meaning understood by the general public, and how I interpreted it. Begin with the simplest part of the question, the definition. According to the Oxford Learner Dictionary 2014 edition, a dictionary of the English language that is internationally recognized, the word silence is a noun to describe a condition that is completely lack of noise or sound, or a situation where nobody is speaking, which is similar to the information provided by Wikipedia, no sounds ultra by anybody in the room or area. This is a free open contents online server program that enables access by anyone to edit the contents. Therefore, for the sake of this research, this would be my resource to the public's view on the matter. The statement on a place without sound linked to the Google image. It might be a wonder why these appear in the search, but as the results from the search engine are from what people upload and share on the internet. These are what the wider popularity common associate with the word. The immediate reaction to the sign would be the refrain from talking and keeping noise from movement to the minimum, which can be found in library and other settings that demand a quiet presence. To some contents, this picture could be considered as a visual language that symbolize the term silence, couldn't it not? In that case, have I found the silence in picture in this emoji figure? Does this image give you a sense of silence? Imagine being in a library without voice or any other noise. What can be heard? Would that be sound of silence? However, realistically speaking, there will always be some kind of noise interference, no matter if it is man-made or not. So, does true silence even exist? Surely the answer to the question is much more complex. From what I've gathered, there is not a place on Earth that is completely lack of sound, and even in space, where is a vacuum with no air particle to add the transmission of the sound waves vibration, there are man-made satellite and space stations that have molecules to transmit sound. Therefore, silence can be as a type of sound as in my understanding. Silence is a subjective term as it could interpreted differently, depends on the individual and the experience. Here is an example. A workshop of this module was conducted at the Holy Trinity Church on 28th of October 2014. A group of students then they were told to write down a list of any sound inside and outside of the building that was heard in a given time. It was surprisingly how many different noises that we do not normally pay attention to, the little details as life surrounding you that wouldn't be noticed unless you remove all the disturbances and listen to them, like sound of flipping paper, like footstep, and scratching nose. the mowing noise of the seagull and cars passing by outside on the street. In this instant, the sound of silence is actually the background noise that is always there, but we very often forget about it. Here is a quote for Gordon Hampton that summarized the idea perfectly. Silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything. This shows a similar idea, but instead of the removing of something, it added an extra element that allowed the audience to feel the place in a different light, as seen in this picture of placing an empty flame on a patterned wall, turning it into a piece of artwork. Therefore, using the same theory from before, this could very well be a representation of silence in picture. Another idea of the sound of silence would be the musical piece by John Cage, 4 minutes 33 seconds, which produced in 1951, which was performed by William Max, recorded in 2010. This is a piece of music written without any music note, basically music with no sound, and only the background noise of a silent stage and audience will record onto the track. The evidence adds to my firm belief that there is no such thing as absolute silence. Scientifically speaking, as some of you may know, that sound is a vibration that reproduces as a typical audio machinery wave of pressure through a medium such as air or water. The vibrating particle moving in so-called sound wave. Similar to how computers operate on numeral data that are programmed into image. Sound waves are translated by human's brain from signal that receive through the eardrum by the movement of the vibration. From GCSE physics, we had learned the sound wave that has been recorded and studied. Several terminology frequency, amplitude, and wavelength are used to describe the wave that present as graph. The frequency of a sound is measured by the number of peaks and waves produced by the vibration in a given amount of time and is given the unit Hertz, which stands for 1 vibration per second. Amplitude is the distance from the baseline or undisturbed position to the peak of the wave. Is determined the volume of the sound. So the louder the sound, the more to the other. The more distant there is between the peak and baseline. Similarly, the frequency measured distance from one peak or wave to another, the determinant of the pitch of a sound. So the higher the pitch, the higher the frequency, meaning that there are more waves in a given time. Using this as a base knowledge, it can be assumed that the baseline or undisturbed position can be used to represent silence, and therefore theoretically speaking, it shows that the silence in picture as there is no vibration during that fraction of a second, that is silence. Another way of seeing this visually is with an example of a electrocardiogram. A slightly straight transverse line across the ECG screen, displaying the vibration of a heartbeat and a temporary still human heart. With the understanding of how wave is transmitted through movement of particle and that the frequency made by vibration, it make it all the more fascinating on the YouTube video titled Amazing Horizontal Experiment. This is a clip that exhibits the way the vibration affect the movement of the white sand that were placed on top of a black metal attached to a wave driver, so-called the speaker.
368. A little more, please. 404. More stuff. Next. 404. Okay, next. 452.
Certain frequencies vibrate the metal plate in such a way that it creates area where there is no vibration. The vibration or sound wave move in a particle sequentially that allow the sound to be distributed on the plate in a different patterns. So where there is no vibration, the white sound gathers. The pattern become more complex as the hertz of the sound wave increase. For instance, this picture was captured at the beginning of the video at 345 Hz, and 2 minutes and 44 seconds after in this video at 4840 Hz. Compare the two images, the one that with a higher frequency produce more white line and make more complex pattern, meaning that the area of no vibration are likely to be more closely packed together, much like what would be seen if shown on a graph. It is then logically to think that where there are no vibration, there is no sound, and therefore represents silence. With the sound wave, that would otherwise be invisible to the naked eyes. Visualized onto a plate, is it then not easy to make the conclusion that the place where the white sound will be the part that show the sound silence or silence in picture? The producer, Bob Spurps, written that such a way that it creates area where there is no vibration, the sound set into this area. However, it is important to keep in mind that the area with no vibration is actually a place where less vibration than the empty space. Also, the fact that this pattern is not stationary. The white sound is constantly moving and vibrating due to the wave from the metal plate, even we can't see it with our own eyes. If we look at the sound on its own, on the man-made and natural state, it is not difficult to see that in the natural state, the sound takes up almost wave-like formulation that comparing it to an image taken from the experiments video. And as we know that these particles can be manipulated by sound wave, it can be assumed that sound can be visualized all around us naturally if we look close enough. Therefore, based on the few previous example that I've stated, I would still like to claim that there is no absolute silence. Then I came across an interesting philosophical theory that I present this idea to a friend of mine. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? This is first proposed by a philosopher named George Berkeley during 1710, which later in the 1700 he included in his book titled A Treasure Concerning the Principles of Human Knowledge in 1734. The object of sense exists only when they are preserved. What I understand from this theory is that if a sound or an event happen in a place where no living beings with normal sense such as hearing or sight would dare to witness it, then can we say that it actually occurred or exists? Using his example, if a tree falls and no one was there to hear it when it didn't make a sound at all, but things that you can sense does not make that it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Yeah. Yeah. Therefore, just because you didn't hear a sound doesn't mean that the sound never occurred. It is in effect saying that a sound is only a sound when there is something or someone to receive. This is technically true. A sound are just waves or vibration particles that at different frequency until reach a receiver. In our case, the eardrum, with a translator, our brain, to make it into a sound understood by us. This reminds me of a real conversation between a professor and a student I read about a long time ago. It went like this. Does evil exist? The professor believed so. He claimed that if God created everything, then God created evil, since evil exists. But then his student asked again, if coal exists? It is no surprise that the professor has answered yes, and his student answered, in fact, sir, coal does not exist. According to the law of physics, what we consider cold is actually in reality of the absence of heat. Absolute zero is the total absence of heat. All matter becomes incapable of reaction at that temperature. Cold does not exist. We have created this word to describe how we feel if we have no heat. The student continues by asking, Professor, does darkness exist? Of course it does, Professor answered. And the student replied, You're wrong, sir. Darkness does not exist either. Darkness is in reality the absence of light. Light we can study, but not darkness. So, could this not then apply for the idea of silence? In my opinion, silence does not exist. Silence is in reality of the absence of sound. Sound you can study, but not silence. So, the students say again. In fact, we can use Newton primum to break the white light into many colors and study the variety wavelength of each color. You cannot measure darkness. How can you know how dark a certain place is? You measure the amount of light that is present. Isn't this correct? Darkness is a term used by men to describe what happens when there is no light present. The student in this conversation, as some of you may know, it is Albert Einstein. If using this principle for sound, then silence is only a term used to describe a state where there is no sound audible to the audience present. This would mean that individuals experience silence differently, as the common note state human hearing range is between 20 Hz to 20,000 Hz. But is variety between person to person, and it is also changing and reduced as we age. Using an example to explain this, in one of the physics lessons in school, the teacher played a range of sound frequency and told the student to hold their hands up until they could no longer hear anything. Some held their hands longer than the other, which shows that they have wider range. Therefore, silence would be used to describe the noise that has a frequency outside each personal audio spectrum, which would further support my point that absolute silence does not exist. collectively, as some might not hear sound that others do. But that doesn't mean the sound is not there. In the horizontal experience mentioned earlier, if higher frequency outside the human audio spectrum were used, then it would also prove the point that even if it cannot comprehend a sound due to the biological limitation, it can be visualized by the movement of sound. Here is another recording published by John Harvey, a lecturer at this university, The Silence of 2013. This piece was complete accidental and record in the total of 16 hours of sound in an empty room after a conference and was stopped the following morning at 8:35 a.m. During this short selection of recording, there was never a second of absolute silence. There was consistently a consistent rough, rusty static noise throughout and a very obvious backing noise when that was captured at 24 seconds. The point I'm trying to make with the use of this example is there is no space, be it man-made or natural, even without any living being in that space, is without sound. I'm trying so hard to emphasize the idea that completely lack of noise or sound does not exist. So let's go back to the theoretical question that which I raised earlier. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? 20 years after Bakeley proposed the idea, William Forrest studied the theory to come up with a more clear and understandable explanation. He written, To say something is meaningful is to say that that is how we arrange it so, how we comprehend it to be, and how and what it is comprehended by you. For example, if a tree falls in a pot and there is no one to hand, it is silence and invisible and nameless. And if we were to vanish, there would be no tree at all. Any meaning would vanish along with us. Basically, no was his answer to the question, as he believed that the world is only what it is, depend on how individual person perceive it. Even events are only considered to have happened if they are witnessed. Therefore, if sound waves were never received and translated, then it does not exist, creating the condition of silence with lack of noise or sound. Here is a piece by Louise Leroux, titled "Train after Arrival of a Train at the Coaster." It was produced during 1896, captured about 40 seconds of train arrival into a platform. Noticing that no sound was recorded, which makes this essentially a silence in moving picture, much like film in the early days of production. This is a good example of how the brain makes up for other sense from the information received. The clip shows a train approaching the station, people people talking crisply, running and jumping in front of the camera. Although we cannot physically hear the noise in the short film, we can almost hear the sound inside our head because we know that these sounds are like as we have all heard them, and our brain have cataloged it. Much like when you're saying we have a song stuck in our head, we can hear the sing without actually listening to it. Going back to the point made by Forrest earlier, we humans give meaning to our surrounding in this world, in the way we comprehend it. Without living beings acting as the observer, then how can we be sure that something actually happened in the way that we assume it did? This train and the people that were there at the exact time, the particular place would not be known if not for this short clip was filmed over a century ago, because the people who have experienced the event that day would have all died by now. So without these form of documentation like this one, how would we know that this occurred? Similarly, just because no sound wave was recorded doesn't mean that they were there. And though we can't experience it in the way that event happened, we have other sense to make up for it. In June 1883, a magazine presented a question that was much the same as Bakeley's. If a tree were to fall on an island where there is no human being, would there be any sound? The technical aspect of the question was corresponded a year later on 5th of April 1884 by another journal called Scientific American, who stated sound is a vibration transmitted to our sense through the machinery of the ear and recognized as sound only at our nerve center. The falling of the tree or any other disturbance will produce vibration of the air. If there be no ears to hear, there will be no sound. Corresponding to the explanation in the Oxford Learner Dictionary 2014, in which states that vibration that travel through the ear or another medium and can be heard when they reach a person's ears or animal ears. It should be noted that unlike light and heat, sound wave can only be transmitted through the vibration of particle. So when sound wave across a space air particle are need and act as what you call it as a messenger to pass along the code that need to be delivered to the receiver and decode to translate at a center. In that sense, if the code remains a code and the message is not received, then there is no message. Therefore, sound waves are not transmitted into a sound, translated into a sound, meaning that there is no one to hear it. Then there is no sound at all. This philosophy was also studied by Albert Einstein and his fellow Niels Bohr. They were unable to come up with a definite conclusion, but Bohr commented, "However hard Einstein may try, he would never be able to prove it does." Though giving this the state of a kind of an in, conjunction one that one cannot be either proof or disprove. So basically, he's saying that no matter how hard Albert Einstein and himself try to find a definition, they can this question can never be proved or disproved. Although there is no right or wrong answer to this, if a tree were to fall on an ice island, would there no human where there were no human being, would there be any sound? From what I've learned in this research I mentioned earlier, my response to the question would be no. However, this does not equal to me saying I agree with that there is absolute silence. Let me explain with the use of the following example: an echoic chamber, which located at a laboratory in the US. A room that is testified to being 99% sound absorbed and hold a Guinness World Record for the world's quietest place. This is a room that is testified designed to complete absorb or reflection of the sound wave, either sound wave or electrical magnetic wave that isolate from any external source of noise, so that the only source of the sounds would be from whoever in the chamber. Even though the material used to build this inside of the room is solidly soundproof against any sound energy travel from a source into a wall, with almost none of the sound wave reflecting back, there is still medium of which the wave can utilize and transmit the energy, which is the air particle allow the person inside the chamber to breathe. The most common remark by those who have been inside the chamber is that it is terrifying. Also, quote, there is people who rack inside the room, says that they were disoriented and they don't want to be in there and they walk out. Some even comment that total silence could be so jarring that they experienced hallucination. Does this room provide a setting that is completely absent of sound? Surely not, because you yourself become a source of sound when you are put inside the chamber. This space gives you the opportunity to pick up otherwise undetachable noise due to our interference in a normal place, such as the sound your heart beating, the blood flushing through your veins in your ear. Like I mentioned before, there are sounds that we don't normally notice because they are covered by other disturbances, which would likely confuse our brain and other sense, make it seem like hallucination of some sort. Some would say that they could have voices they could hear voices. But are these voices from inside their head? Do you think that do you talk to yourself without actually speaking?
There are reports that it's impossible to stay in one of these rooms and remain sane for a significant period of time. The record is apparently 45 minutes. I felt a little claustrophobic. It felt like there's a lot of pressure on my head. But why would that be? I mean, the air is no different in here. What I figured is just because when you listen in a normal room, there's a lot of reverb. To your ear, that means there's a lot of space, but there's none of that in here, so it feels claustrophobic. It feels like you're in a tiny room, like you could be in a coffin. Okay, maybe, yeah. I think it's really an anxiety response. So you're used to having these sounds around you, and then you don't anymore, and so you start to panic because you don't have something you're used to. And I think that anxiety can increase and cause some stress, and maybe that's why people go crazy or hallucinate with sound. It's just because they're trying to make up for what they're used to that isn't there. When I bring people in, I warn them, hey, if you get a little dizzy, please let me know so I can get you out of the room before you make a mess in our expensive facilities. First you'll hear any rustle of your clothing, so you move an inch and you'll hear it. Then you'll hear any fluids that are in your mouth or your throat. You'll hear them all moving around every time you move your mouth. And the longer you stay there, the more you hear. So you start to hear the blood flow through your brain. Have you heard it? Mm-hmm. It sounds kind of like a ringing or a pulsing. Can you kind of make the sound for us so that we know what to listen out for? Of the blood flow? Yeah, it sounds like a pulsing, like... Some people say they can hear their heartbeat coming from their chest as well. Have you heard that? No. A violinist placed in one of these rooms was apparently... I'm not sure how long I've been in here, but I still feel quite comfortable. It's nice and quiet. I mean, that's an understatement. But it's relaxing. If I hear anything, I feel like I hear a low-pitched hum.
Some would say that they could hear voices, but are those voices from inside their head? Do you talk to yourself without actually speaking? It's sometimes like you are talking to yourself, but it also feels like you're talking to somebody else. Or is it my brain or your brain using different voices in a one-person conversation? Or is it the little shoulder angel devil may have described that I'm talking to? No matter what these voices are and where they originate from, it is fact that no vibration of the particle are created. And so on, actual sound are produced. But somehow these voices are real as they can get. In an environment where there is low background noise level, these voices might be seen as a hallucination, but could it be a voice from God? This thought brought an image into my mind. Remind me of when people were praying. They're obviously talking to God, but doing it silently inside their head. Let's illustrate with an example of a girl praying. But before that, I'm going to show you a short voice record of people praying. That's how I picture when that's the voices similar to what I can hear when I see people praying in a church. Oops. And now we're going to illustrate it with an example. Girls Praying by Italian painter Roberta Frosty. That little girl with her lips slightly shut and look up at a distance, her eyes filled with word and hope and praying to the unknown. I wonder if this would be the image of sound of silence, or what silence would look like as a picture. This is seemingly quite a scene, as I'm sure most people will have experienced at a time when everything around you is still, but word and sound are rushing through your mind. It might look quiet on the outside, but in actually it's loud and chaotic. Another example would be a drawing that were discussed during one of the lecture, the Angelus, produced by Jane Forster Mitte during 1859. The painting displayed of two farmers with their hands clasped together and bowing head given the impression that they are praying. There is a basket of potatoes between them on the floor, and to the right corner of the painting have suggested um, have suggested that it, of on the on to the right corner of the piece there is a view of a church tower located on the horizontal. Those who have viewed the painting have suggested that these two farmers are bowing in the field because it was the time of the day for the prayer, as indicated by the church to pray, as indicated by the church bell. Some even claim that when staring into the painting, the sound of a bell ringing could be heard but of course, only in their mind. So, could this could this be considered as the sound of silence? Although my focus point of this painting is slightly different, my concentration was on the voice inside their mind as they are praying. As I'm studying this piece, my mind was filled with strange voices saying prayers, and of course the sound are not from the actual character on the painting themselves, but from the sounds that my brain have registered and recalls from the previous experience. Therefore, the sound of the church bell ringing, similar to the sound of a prayer, would have a different appearance in tone due to the varying individual experience. So the idea of self-silence, as I've said before, depending on the person. And I'm going to show you two pieces of work that is illustrated from the same from the painting I mentioned before. both can demonstrate the type of sound that was said to be heard from just looking at the painting. This in turn led me into thinking about the motion of praying as a type of sound silence. A simple gesture can trigger a response in the observer's brain in bringing up a relative sound to that image without receiving a sound vibration in the process. Most gestures are so well known globally that people are familiar to the meaning and rarely need um, accompanying sound or spoken word to explain or to understand them. So, would this be would this body language be the visualization of the sound of silence, or even silence in picture where no words are exchanged in communication from one person to the other? From what I've presented up to this point, in the understanding of existing of silence, how it can prove using different media and comprehend with the theory or experience, I believe that silence is a personal experience that is unique to the individual. Based on what we've said so far, in that silence is readable through the yellowy emoji image, piece of music with sorry um detail that can pick up from a seemingly boring piece of wood after placing a flame to limit the height and highlight its features. A piece of music with no sound, no notes. The stationary baseline of sound frequency graph. Sound vibration from the speaker that move white sound into different pattern. And use of body language. But is that all there is to silence? In my opinions, absolute silence does not exist, but as it is a subjective matter, there are different ways of recording and document the sound of silence and silence in picture. When looking at a topic on silence in picture, there are two ways of digesting the proposed question: the input and output between silence and the picture. To expand on this, it is the way silence can be represented and delivered to the observer through an image on how silence can be created or projected onto a picture or a piece of artwork. Art can be expressive in different form, not limited to painting, and one of the form is through music. As I've mentioned before, the music piece by John Cage, 4 minutes 33 seconds, was recreate of silence. As the term itself means the lack of sound, I wanted to look for a piece of work that can demonstrate the effect of music visually using natural materials that can allow us to experience the sound with a different sense as sight. The example that I'm going to use is a music video created by a musician named Nigel Stanford, who is who with the use of several materials visualize what music looks like in this piece of his work.
Everything owes its existence solely, completely to sound.
Stanford used physics theory and experiments such as Killy plate, he named, metal plates that conduct the vibration in creating pattern that is very similar to another YouTube video, so-called water-based water sound make water come alive in 2013, but instead of water he used vodka. It is amazing to see how sound wave can be transformed into visualized pattern, and music can be performed with the use of natural materials. But even more fascinating is to see how music or sound that is hidden in one of those natural elements, namely wood or trees. Trees is a very still living organism that have a slow growth process which cannot be detached with our human eyes, but can be proved with their growth ring inside the trunk. Growth rings are patterns created by a new growth of the vascular cumulum, like a new skin that grow on top of the old. And the ring marks the season that the tree grows through, which can also be used to predict the age of one ring generally means 1 year. Years 2011 by a German designer Buffalo Thomas Trumbach. It's a video of a record player playing slide of wood using their growth ring as a guide. The microscopical image of the ring are translated into sound through a music programming and recreate audible sound by a 12-tone system from a two-dimensional style of living organism. Some would describe the sound of silence as the lack of human and or man-made noise interference. So, could this piece of music be an example to sound of silence that is recorded in one of the nature's most important organisms? In terms of music score, the silence exists between the chance of the change of notes each bar of the music. In a lecture on 7th of October 2014, the professor used a few examples of how sound and color are connected. Also, the source of sound that normally comes to mind when this image is shown. The static noise sound of a television screen when there's nothing connected to the cable. In terms of visualizing silence, colors are of a close relation to sound as both travel in waves and have particular frequency. This can be shown through the Newton prism experience of how colors that we see are translated through the different reflection of light wave frequency, and began to wonder whether or not color and sound can interchange and in some way equal to one another as they both exist in waves. The color black appear when no light waves are reflected from a surface, meaning that it is the absence of light or any other colors in the visual light spectrum. Darkness cannot be measured, but determined by how many light is present or lack thereof. It makes sense that this can be applied to sound, so silence could be measured by the degree of noise interference, whether or not it is audible to the human ear. I think it has been made clear that I do not agree that silence exists, as it is physically impossible to have a space that absolute silence, no noise pollution at all, and I have demonstrated that even with painting, image, and patterns, our brain interpret where we receive through the eyes, and brings about a reaction that expect our other sense to hear the sound that associate with what we see. I think most importantly, this is that what comprehend from the world through either hearing or sight, all of which are connected to how we feel, our emotion, of what drives us, and it is the sense of calm that and stillness that we get from looking at a piece of artwork, that feeling the silence in picture. It is also with our emotion that we convey it into a piece of work that allow for the audience or observers to experience what is spoken wordlessly through visualization. Due to its subjectivities, silence is not singular but hold all kinds of different meaning to the individual beholder. So this will be my the end of my presentation.